Hello and welcome to the Last Week in AI podcast, where you can hear us chat about what's going on with AI. As usual, in this episode, we will be summarizing and discussing some of last week's and maybe even 2 weeks worth of AI news. As always, you can also go to the episode description to get to the links to all the stories and the timestamps, so you can skip ahead if you want to. I am one of your regular co-hosts, Andrei Kurenkov. I studied AI in grad school and now work at a generative AI startup.
And I'm your other host, Jeremy Harris. I am the co-founder of Gladstone AI national security company, blah, 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 blah. And welcome back. I mean, it's good to be back. It's good to be back in the seat after, God, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, but we had like two simultaneous launches of things that happened within, I want to say a week or a week and a half of each other. And so Andre was like super busy the first week, then I was busy the next week. And it's just been it's been a real fun time.
Yeah, the fun bit, we were also discussing how because we do this podcast, we actually have to be on top of what's going on in AI, and not doing it was actually kind of strange. On the other hand, because it is Last Week in AI, we do try to do it once a week, and it is a bummer when we have to miss some. So we are going to try to be consistent, at least for the next few months, until we have any more launches. But hopefully listeners understand, unfortunately, we do have day jobs and so on, which sometimes take priority, it happens. But the good news is nothing huge happened in the past couple of weeks. There's been some interesting things to discuss, and we will get into some of those, covering some things that are a little bit older and some things that are brand new. And that's kind of a preview of the episode. In Tools and Apps, we're going to talk about some kind of patterns we've seen with OpenAI being very, what people call sycophantic lately, and the whole drama about that. Also, some brand new news about Anthropic and IPC servers, which is pretty cool. Applications and business, as always, a few stories about chips and China, and also some funding news for some startups, projects in open source, a few new models, and actually some research as well. Research and advancements, some pretty spicy results we're going to get into about leaderboards, and more research really explaining what's going on with reasoning and RL, and then policy and safety, some things about malicious uses of AI and vulnerability, things like that. So it'll be a fun little episode. I think we're going to enjoy discussing some of these things. And jumping straight into tools and apps, the first story is brand new. It's about Anthropic letting users connect more apps for Claude. So this is basically allowing you to have direct integration to various services. We have a starting set of partnerships with things like Atlassian, Zapier, Cloudflare, Intercom, Square, PayPal, and others. The idea is that when you enter a query into Claude, it'll have a little pop-up that's basically like, do you give me permission to talk to the service, Atlassian or Zapier or whatever, to do whatever you want it to do, and it can directly do it for you. So instead of having an AI built into your, Jira task tracker for work that is custom, Claude can now directly talk to that thing using presumably this model context protocol standard way to communicate to services that Anthropic released last year and has kind of taken off. And it can directly talk to that and basically be your AI for your task tracking software.
Yeah, so we're also looking at this as an option for our programmers. Let me just switch over. Codex and Chat GPT. So this would allow engineers and even non-engineers to, I guess, talk to and edit a code base. So pretty interesting stuff that affects our work directly.
or it can be your AI to process news. It can basically now open up and be a chatbot that can do all sorts of stuff. And, this is similar to letting your AI just do web surfing for you, to do whatever, it needs to fulfill your task. But I guess much more elegant and direct, where it can talk directly to the service and can query it for you without having to do the, I don't know, like grunt work of pressing buttons and logging in and so on. So I think pretty exciting in terms of a release for Claude that really makes it much more broadly useful, and kind of impressive to see them taking the lead in this particular way of using chatbots.
Yeah, it definitely seems like Anthropic building on the early advantage they had with the MCP protocol, which OpenAI obviously has since taken on board, and other companies too. So it is becoming the de facto standard, and it positions Anthropic really well in the space. It's also, it's consistent with this vision, right, that we heard, well, many times, but kind of most famously articulated in that Leopold Aschenbrenner situational awareness thing about the drop-in remote worker, right? This is really a step in that direction. You've got a model now able to just call these tools directly. It's being productized. It is being rolled out, this version at least, to Claude Max subscribers, enterprise plan subscribers, and soon to Pro. So again, it's Anthropic kind of finding the sweet spot of what they're going to charge for the kind of higher tier subscriptions. That's been a question recently too, right? When they introduced Claude Max, they said we would give early access to people who sign up for that tier, early access to new capabilities. This is apparently one of those capabilities they flagged for that. So starting to kind of flex that muscle a bit too. But yeah, this is on the step to fully replacing certain kinds of like, well, it depends on the way you wire things up, but certain kinds of engineers, certain kinds of, well, again, if you're doing some kind of like sales back-end work or whatever, there's a lot of stuff that could be straight up automated down the road if they keep pushing in this direction. So kind of interesting, and we'll see what the impact is too on the job market. I mean, there are some indications that this stuff is really starting to rattle, especially juniors or entry-level roles. But yeah, well, it definitely a big cost savings if you're able to get these sorts of agents to do your work for you.
Okay, so yeah, that's just a little preview of what we're working on. I recently added, so lately we've been focusing almost exclusively on public meetings that are with like city council streamed on Zoom, but I'm also testing out using this summarizing tool for podcasts and just areas that interest me. So that's what we're following along with here. And this is all just, these guys are really up on the latest news in AI. So I thought for a Saturday, we could focus on this. Not really too many updates on the public meeting front, just working on filling out the content on the homepage and getting those article issues fixed. But yeah, like I said, I think what they're talking about in this webinar podcast is relevant to some news that just came out last week that we got wind of. Just this idea of using ChatGPT to talk to your code base in a secure way through this API and the GitHub integration. So pretty cool to see them talking about this stuff that's impacting our projects. All right, let's switch back here.
Exactly. I know personally, as someone who does programming, so far you've had to sort of wire up things yourself. Like, let's say you want to write a script to process a spreadsheet, to do some work for you. Typically that's involved writing a script to really do it efficiently, to not have to download it, attach it, write the prompt. Now it makes it much easier to automate things via prompt because you don't need to do any sort of manual steps. I can directly talk to whatever data source it needs to do the task. So a simple example, again, just to make this clear, is they show you being able to ask what's on my calendar. and then Cloud can directly talk to your calendar. You have to press a little button to allow it to get the data, and then it can answer your questions about that. So really, I do think kind of a pretty significant step in terms of expanding the capabilities of LLMs and this kind of service to do all sorts of stuff for you in a way they could not have done before. Worth noting also, as far as new features goes, they did launch their own research tool, because apparently every single provider of LLMs needs one, and they are launching an advanced research tool, which is their fancier one. It can take 5 to 45 minutes to compile comprehensive reports for you. So also interesting to me that it turned out for agentic AI and for these reasoning models that deep research has turned out to be one of the, power use cases. And next up, we are going to talk about OpenAI, and they've had something pretty embarrassing, I will say, in the last couple of weeks. So if you're on Twitter, or if even you use ChatGPT, there's been a lot of discussion of a recent update of GPT-4o, where they have made it, let's say, very enthusiastic and positive when communicating to people. I didn't know this word, actually. Glazing, apparently, is what people describe it as. Where, basically the model is like you enter a basic query or something like that, and the model just cheers you on to no end. It's sort of crazy, telling you, oh, this is such a deep insight, this is such a good idea, etc., etc. And it was so bad, and there's been such kind of bad examples that OpenAI seemingly really rushed to fix it. Sam Altman actually announced on X that they are working on some fixes ASAP to address the personality issues from the last couple of GPT-4 updates. They rolled out update to the system prompt that some people talked about. They've also seemingly done a full rollback of GPT to a previous state of it. So I would say, there's questions as to how this happened. It's potentially the case that they try to make it overly optimized for engagement or for positive feedback by users. But it's clearly, like, when you look at some of these responses, it's clear that something went wrong here. And it's something we haven't seen from one of the major players yet in this way.
Yeah, it's also hard not to notice that this is happening just weeks after OpenAI announced that they're no longer going to be focusing on persuasion capabilities as part of their preparedness framework in the same way as they had. So when you think about persuasion capabilities, certainly sycophancy in these models is something that you might correlate with persuasion, right? Telling people, oh, you're so smart, what a great idea, what a great question. When you optimize, and I haven't seen clear indications that they had optimized directly for rewards. I've seen some posts on X of people saying, like, hey, here's an option that showed up. Do you like this personality or not? Like thumbs up, thumbs down type thing, which, to be clear, I think is a gigantic mistake, a really, really dangerous precedent for OpenAI to be setting. Frankly, I mean, we've seen OpenAI do related things, be willing to kind of push the envelope on some stuff. You could often argue for it or whatever, but when it comes to like optimizing, when you close that feedback loop between yourself and, like, the, if you will, the person that you're talking to make them more agreeable or more likable by you, I think that is pretty clearly a very, very dangerous thing to be doing when you have as much compute as they do, when we already have evals that are showing these models are really effective at persuasion and manipulation. That's the sort of thing you start to think about at the next beat of scale, at the next beat of sort of subtlety and persuasion and manipulation, which these models seem to be on track for. So anyway, I think this is definitely a space to watch. There's not necessarily going to be smoke the next time there's fire. And that's something that I think people really need to understand. These models are, by definition, getting good at persuasion means, or almost by definition, it means that the other person doesn't realize that's what's going on. So as you keep pushing in that direction, as you use more and more subtle cues, feedback cues from users, I think a lot of people have very justified concerns that we're heading in a direction where, there's a certain amount of asymmetry between the user and the company here, where the company is able to think on computer clock time about how to optimize their relationship with the user. That's not necessarily healthy, especially aggregated over the entire population, hundreds of millions of people interacting with this stuff.
Right. And just to get into some basic examples, a lot of this was kind of funny, and people started posting examples where they directly got the LM to be as silly as possible. So, one example, just pulling up of Twitter, someone says, I just woke up, did 2 push ups, and might brush my teeth in the next 6 hours. ChatGPT said, you have achieved a level of mastery few dare to even imagine, the delicate art of strategic patience. To waking is itself a small revolution. To do 2 push-ups immediately afterward is a declaration of war against inertia. I will say perhaps this example is, tweaked. I'm just pulling off of internet, but that shows you kind of the flavor of what you're seeing. It's the model is being very much a suck up, saying very extremely positive things that are not natural. And I just actually searched, and OpenAI just posted a blog post today as we are recording titled Expanding on What We Missed with Sycophancy. And they go into, in April 25, they pushed an update. The update had a few things, each thing individually didn't look so bad, and their metrics were good, et cetera, et cetera. They're talking about what will improve in our process, what we're learning. So a pretty embarrassing kind of situation here, right? The fact thing. Another thing that people pointed out is some people are getting very close to these ChatGPT models, people who are perhaps possibly delusional or in a bad mental health situation. Talking to the chatbots can seriously affect them. And so you need to be careful with how positive, how affirming these chatbots can be, and how much they reinforce whatever you're telling it. That has real implications, even aside from, let's say, theoreticals of persuasion or things like that. So yeah, a lot of discussion, I think, will be going from this event, and some studies and so on, to really get into how you can tip models to be a little bit extreme, and otherwise quite an interesting phenomena. A few more stories.